Hello and welcome to Let's Scope. Today we have Chris Sohl, sports editor of Kaleidoscope newspaper, and
How are you, Sophion?
welcome to the show. This is your first time here. I'm excited.
Yeah, very excited.
So today's topic is going to be the mid-year check-in, and today we're checking in with Chris Sohl. We're going to see how he feels about school today versus the first day of school, and his impressions of how the school is handling the COVID-19 situation, and then we could also go into how the world has changed in the last couple of months. So, Sol, walk us through what you were thinking on the first day of school.
Sophion, as a senior, I was obviously very disappointed with coronavirus kind of messing up our year last year. So going into this year, I was very skeptical of what was going to happen. I was actually really excited to find out we were going to be going back to school full time. So first day of school, other than really wearing masks, I don't really think there's anything too crazy for me. Usually around this time we're playing sports and everything, but obviously that couldn't happen. But walking into school and just being able to see everybody again on the first day was definitely a relief. The summer was fun, but I always like to go back to school, see kids I haven't seen in a while and that kind of stuff. But class has been going great. So first day of school overall for me was a pretty good experience.
That's really good to hear. And now, so let's talk about how you went to school today. Did you feel any different than you did the first day of school, or do you feel kind of the same?
It's pretty similar, I would say. A lot there's some teachers, with the recent upbringing of COVID cases, some of the teachers are definitely a little more cautious with their processes they do. Getting used to doing everything online. That was something that in the beginning of the year was a bit of a struggle, adapting to online tests, using Google Meet. I've become a little more tech savvy, if you would say, using certain things. I've had some teachers teach me virtually. So I would definitely say it's pretty similar, but now I'm more equipped to do it. I definitely feel more comfortable learning online. But today was just a regular day, couple tests, nothing crazy.
I kind of have to agree with you there about the whole teachers becoming more tech savvy, like especially those teachers that had to quarantine because they were exposed or like for whatever reason were mandated to quarantine that were teaching from home. That was a completely different experience. I'm virtual, so I don't really know how it was like in school, but I know that you're in
Man.
school. And do you think it was like odd to learn online from school?
Yeah, so especially for math, my math teacher, Mr. Downer, is virtual this week. He's the first teacher that's actually like taught us that I've had teach virtually, and math, everything you got to be doing on paper and stuff. So it's difficult having you're looking at a computer screen and looking at your notebook, looking at a computer screen, where usually you're just looking up at the whiteboard and everything. But it's definitely an experience. We're seniors. We should be able to handle this a little bit of adversity, but I would say math is definitely one of the more difficult subjects to have a teacher go virtual for. But you do what you can. There's a lot of other stressors in everyone's lives, and we're pretty lucky to be able to go to school. So you just kind of got to go past it and just even if the situation is not ideal, just you can. We're still learning. We're still in school, so just gotta keep that in the back of your head.
Yep. Um, I know that you play sports. Uh, how did you feel this year with sports? Especially with like the COVID precautions and everything.
Yeah, it was really devastating. Most of my friends are athletes as well, and there are a lot of kids who go to school and just really the only thing they have to look forward to is sports. Whether they have a difficult situation at home, sports provide students and athletes kind of a place to come together and just put your heart on the field. Especially your senior year, it's supposed to be that special run in the playoffs and whatnot. We've been having, like practices here and then, wearing masks, being safe and everything. And actually, in lacrosse, we had a winter league over the Christmas break, which was nice, but it's just not the same. Your teammates become your brothers, and through the past, 3 years through ninth grade, we were all together, and we were hoping for a big last hoorah at the end of our senior year. Especially, in volleyball too, we had a really good we had a really good looking team this year, and it's just a shame that it doesn't look like anything's really going to happen. They are pushing for a March or April start time, which is kind of exciting. Our coaches are optimistic we'll be able to play, but there's definitely going to be restrictions. There's not really going to be parents, and it's just not going to be the same. So it was obviously very heartbreaking for myself and my teammates around me.
So, you said in March they're planning on reopening a couple of sports. Uh,
Yeah.
do you mean like for every season or just for the spring season?
So what they did was originally it was supposed to be January. We're going to have sports, but they pushed that date back. So they're shortening some seasons. So for example, volleyball obviously starts in August and goes through, I want to say November-ish. So what they're doing is I believe they're going to try and start in March, and it's only going to be 1 month. So it's going to go into April, and then some of the winter sports were combined with other seasons, like basketball would be in that time frame as well. And then the spring sports they're trying to start in mid to late April, I believe. So if everything goes to plan and COVID kind of stays where it's supposed to be, the season would be much shorter. There are no playoffs this year, so even if a season does happen, states runs, county championships, that stuff doesn't happen. But any kind of playing we can get is great. But yeah, so they're just trying to make it a shorter season for those lower risk sports, I would say.
Moving on, we could talk about how midterms are coming up, and if you have like
Mm,
any opinion about midterms, they're all virtual this year as opposed to
yeah.
every other year. Uh, yeah, if you have any opinion about that, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah. So I'm not a big test taker. I've never been a big test taker. I hate standardized testing, but midterms are just kind of, they're just kind of another nuisance as part of the school year. But I think the virtual presents a lot of challenges for kids. If you're at home and your internet crashes or your Chromebook crashes, that could, jeopardize your entire score or whatever. But a lot of teachers, what they're doing is instead of having their test during the midterm week, I know for economics, they're doing it on Monday right before the midterm week. So what they're doing is they're just having the test that day. I've had a couple of finals already, but it's just, I feel like in times like this, I feel like our school, I don't want to say shouldn't be giving midterms, but I feel like it should be less official because taking it home is a lot of stress. There's obviously gonna be kids trying to find a way to test or cheat or whatever. So that's a whole nother issue in itself. But I just think the way they did it was kind of poorly organized. I think what they should have done is maybe had teachers just given their test out during a week of school instead, because doing it at home is really stressful and presents a lot of challenges besides the test itself.
Yeah, and something ironic is that as you were talking about poor internet connection, you actually started cutting in and out. But I got everything that you were saying. Um, a lot of our teachers are telling us to use our Chromebook as our primary device, where we actually take our tests to ensure the integrity of the tests and make sure that it's secure. And on a second device, with a camera, use the Google Meet, which we will be joining in order to take our midterms. And I think that that kind of presents a couple of challenges, especially for people that might not have a second device. I think that's kind of a inequality for them next week when the midterms happen. I don't know exactly how the school is accommodating for those people. I'm sure that there's definitely some kind of program out there where they can get a second device. The other problem is Chromebooks, as we know, are just incredibly just not trustworthy. They're not the best devices in general. They're very slow sometimes, and so we're also instructed to power wash our Chromebooks in order to prepare for the midterms and make sure that there's no such thing as crashing or uh, yeah, any kind of internet problems. I think we're getting Soul back on the.
Yeah, my I think my connection's a little bit better now.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yep. So, just yeah, they're trying to power wash our Chromebooks. I don't know, man. I don't think that's gonna do much. The Chromebooks are like already for us. We got them in ninth grade. They're 4 years old, and along with that, they're just not the best or most powerful devices to take our midterms on in general.
Yeah, I mean, the test itself is stressful enough, and just having these odd circumstances on top of it, just I don't understand. I don't really understand it. I understand final exams. Teachers need to see, if you were paying attention in class and you have the knowledge you're supposed to know for for your future years. But I just feel like, especially with politics and stuff, like kids have a lot of stuff that they're worrying about. There are some kids, who can talk about politics for hours, and a lot of stuff happening on the news right now. I feel like it's not really necessary to be testing at this point right now. Teachers can give their second quarter cumulative exams, but I just feel like a midterm right now is not the greatest way for kids, especially kids who are struggling right now.
Yeah, and that's a really fair point. There's so much stuff happening in our country right now that it's a little hard for some people to deal with. Like they have things going on at home, and then they have school on top of that, and then they have the news and whatever the media showing us. It's just
Yeah.
it all piles on, and sometimes can be incredibly stressful for a high school student.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah,
I guess I want to ask you this, Sophian. I was 3 days and I couldn't stand it. I found myself, getting distracted with stuff around in my house, going on my phone in between classes. So I want to ask you, like, how, as a virtual student, how have you been able to maintain your focus, stay on top of your assignments? Because I know being at home is a big distraction, at least for me it is. But I don't know if it's an issue for you, but just how do you stay focused throughout the school day?
honestly, that's a good question. Uh, I say I just treat online school like it's actual school, and I think that mentality is kind of important for an online student because otherwise you just kind of fall back and then don't really care about what's going on in your classes and stuff. But when you treat online school like it's actually school and not just like a day off, it's not
Yeah.
that much harder to maintain focus or whatever. But it is definitely sometimes challenging to focus, especially when nothing's happening in school. I mean, obviously there are times where I just go on my phone because there's nothing else to do. But uh, I think for the most part, I think online school depends on the student really. Like I'm sure that me and you probably have different.
What about testing for you?
Oh well, testing is actually not that bad at all. I'd say that in comparison to in-person testing, it's pretty similar. Um, the only thing is that obviously like you get the test in a PDF form instead of in your hands, but I mean overall, and it's not that different.
Yeah. I would always get worried about, especially for math tests, if
Oh
my
yeah, no,
printer
well, I
decided it
think
didn't want to work or
that
whatever.
actually happened
That would
today.
definitely stress me out if I couldn't get it to work.
I had a math test today actually, and my printer decided not to print today. So
Really?
yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I had to just copy down the questions on a piece of loose leaf
Oh
instead.
my God.
Yeah, so that was a little stressful
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna have to do tomorrow because Mr. Downer is quarantined and he can't come to the school. So I think he's gonna post the test on Google Classroom and then he's just gonna give us we're gonna have loose leaf and we have to copy the questions down. And who knows how much time that's gonna take.
Yeah, no,
So
yeah,
it's crazy.
you'll be fine though. You know, our generation has faced so many things, so many challenges that like these small things don't really feel like anything. I feel like we've been kind of like numbed to everything. I mean, we grew up in the generation with like school shootings, and then now this year with COVID, like we've just
Yeah.
become kind of we've kind of become a little bit numb to what is happening, and I think we're honestly a little bit more we're able to face adversity a lot better. We're like
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of things we're gifted with, we're the age of technology or whatever, and everybody's like, sitting around all day doing stuff. But there's global pandemic that hasn't really happened at all. All this stuff is crazy for the mind of a 17-year-old to kind of comprehend. So I think a lot of times people say Gen Z 21st century babies they have it easy, but a lot of the people forget that I'm a teenager trying to apply to college, and I haven't even seen some of the schools I'm applying to, or I don't even really know anything about it because I wasn't able to visit, or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of challenges we face on a day. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people like the seniors last year. They had it tough by losing the end of their senior year. So I guess I want to ask you, like, what have you done in terms of college? Like, how have you? I don't know if you visited any schools or anything. So how are you doing things online to kind of other than virtual tours and stuff, are you doing anything to help narrow down your decisions at all for school?
I
Anything
mean,
like that?
I don't think it's any different than like a person that is in person right now. I visited a school like last weekend, but the issue is that a lot of schools aren't even holding like in person campus tours, and so that's kind
Yeah.
of a little bit difficult to narrow down your choices of what you got accepted into. Um, and even for juniors actually, because juniors are the ones that are applying to
Yeah.
or have to think about applying to schools. Um,
Do you have any advice for juniors next? Like if conditions don't change, is there anything you think juniors should like that you have learned from doing virtual tours and you know uh, interviews virtually, or do you have any advice for them as they embark on the same journey we have possibly if conditions don't really change?
I just say stay on top of everything. Don't be overwhelmed by like the things that are happening. I mean, if you treat it like a normal year, then it'll feel like a normal year. But if you treat it like it's something else, then you're gonna end up feeling overwhelmed. The other thing is that juniors actually kind of have it a little bit lucky because the SAT is changing. And the SAT is now no essay, and there's no more SAT subject tests, which is
Yeah,
a
that
little
was earlier in the week they announced that.
yep. And I mean, it might be easier for them now. I mean, personally, I don't think that the essay was that much of a struggle,
Yeah, it
but
was optional. It was
it
optional
was already
anyways. Not a
optional.
lot, not a lot. Yeah, not a
Yeah,
lot of kids did it anyway, so I don't think that's a big deal. But the subject tests are just another accolade to include on your college application, just to show your, I don't know, diversity of knowledge. So that's definitely for kids trying to get into the Ivy League schools, whatever. Maybe that's definitely a big deal. I
yeah, I know, I agree. And a lot of schools are already test optional. Um, I think that schools are
think,
figuring out how
yeah,
to determine a student and if they're worthy of entering their university, without an SAT score and especially without a subject test. So yeah, there's
yeah.
just a lot of changes in the college process overall, and I think that schools are tending to stay away from test scores and stuff like that, and just determine an individual without those scores. So I think that's actually a positive change in the college admissions process.
Yeah, because it used to be a lot of reliance on words and everything, but I think, like you said, with a lot of schools test optional, it's definitely you can get a more wholesome approach to a student. But I still would recommend for juniors, if you haven't, still take the test. It's still a good experience to learn how to study for something and try and master a skill. Because if you have an impressive score, especially during a time like this, applying to an Ivy League school with a 1500 plus SAT during now is honestly extra impressive than normal times considering the circumstances. So
Yeah,
a
I
lot of my
definitely
friends,
agree. Yeah,
yeah, a lot of my friends saw, the test optional and said, "Oh, I'm not going to take it, test optional." But I think that's even more motivation to say, you know what, I want to take it. I want to try and do well, and that's just more of an opportunity to stand out because people get into the most selective of programs by solidifying themselves as a worthy candidate. And what better way to do that than get a great score on your SAT when your other peers might not be? So I definitely would recommend that you still study for the SAT. I know finding a test date is much more difficult, but if you can get a really good score on your SAT, that's extra impressive, especially with the current circumstances.
yeah. And the other thing is that colleges use your SAT score a lot to determine whether or not you're eligible for scholarships, and that's super important because obviously you don't want to be like drowning in student loans when you're at the end of your college years. So
Yeah, you never want to start your professional life with being
in
in debt
debt,
$100,000.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah. So that's kind of it's a good point, so that you should definitely be taking your standardized tests if you want to be recognized as a more strong candidate for college.
Yeah, and you can go in saying, there's no pressure, that you really have nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, you do poorly and you don't send it in, but you can go with a mentality like I'm gonna do well. I'm gonna get a whatever score you're going for. And if you get that score, great. If you don't, it's no big deal. It's really a win-win situation because if you get a bad score, you're not forced to send it in. And if you grade a great score, well, you just set yourself up for success. So and I think another issue, especially in high school, is like, clubs and sports, like the extracurriculars are difficult to come by now. I know like Key Club is virtual. Even Kaleidoscope, we have virtual stuff all the time. Like if there was no COVID, we'd probably be over somebody's house right now talking about this stuff. But I think it's similar to the SAT score. If you can find, an extracurricular that, is running smoothly and you put a lot of hours into, I think that's also really impressive. So if you can find ways to do things that would normally happen and do them during a time like this, it's definitely a benefit going into your college years.
Wise words from Crystal, everyone.
Yes, sir.
Future admissions counselor.
No, definitely not. I I, I don't want to put kids through the hell that admissions counselors have put me through. But so, how are you feeling about decision time stuff? You're stressing out about where you want to decide to go.
Well, I got a lot of my acceptance letters back. But now it's just a matter of figuring out where I want to go, and that's kind of gonna be tough because
Definitely.
there's just so many factors that you have to acknowledge, especially like considering COVID and if schools that gets a big factor about COVID. If schools aren't gonna reopen like completely in September, like that could change
Yeah.
where
Do
I
you
go.
really
Cause
want to? Yeah. Do you really want to pay for room and board when you can just stay home and take your preliminary classes at a community college and then go to graduate school and save a ton of money, or you want to pay 70 grand and go to Harvard and stay home? It's crazy, man. And you have to also think depending on what school you go to, is that school, if you go to school like Tampa, the COVID really doesn't even exist there. People are on the
yep,
beaches, they're not wearing masks. And then I was talking to one of my physical therapists the other day, and he was telling me his son goes to Providence, and he was saying he goes to Providence and they lock him in his room. He's not allowed to leave, and so that's also another factor to consider. So I think this year is one of the most difficult decision years because COVID adds a number of other factors that we haven't really seen in the past for deciding where to go to school. So have you narrowed it down to a few choices, so
I mean I only applied to a couple of schools. I only applied to five, so I mean I already had it kind of narrowed down, but
uh,
yeah. I mean there's still a little bit of time. May 1st. That's the day.
it's less than 5 months away now, but feels like
Yeah,
it's tomorrow. It's crazy, man. I think making decisions is more stressful than even applying. Obviously, college has, all that stuff's pain in the butt, but deciding where to go to school is even crazier, especially when, like my situation, I've gotten in a lot of my schools and they've given me like the same exact amount of money. So like every school is like exactly on the same playing field. So it's much more difficult to
are you
choose.
applying for sport? Like, are you going D1 or D2?
Well, that's the other thing. So I don't really want to go Division 1 cross. It's really just take over my life. But there Ithaca College in upstate New York is a school I would play lacrosse at, and so that's another selling point for me. But they're dealing with COVID too, so I got COVID for regular school and COVID for lacrosse. So and the biggest problem is like some of these coaches are going to start giving me like timelines about when I have to be like, okay, you coming or not, and I don't find out. Syracuse is like the dream school, I guess, and I don't find out from them until March. So I have to. The timing of everything is very poor. So that's just another factor for me. I have to take into account.
Yeah, I mean I don't play sports, so I wouldn't really know about how the college
Yeah,
process works with sports, but
yeah,
that sounds a little bit uh, kind of stressful, honestly.
yeah. It's stressful, and this summer events to go to, recruiting things to do. So everything is just kind of hectic. But whenever I'm stressed, I just tell myself that every other student athlete, every other student's in the same boat as me and they're doing it at the same time as me. I think that's just the best thing to think of is, you know, you're sitting there stressed out about where to go to school. We got to remember there's hundreds of thousands, even millions of other kids who are in the same boat as you. So you just got to keep that in mind when you're stressing
That's
out.
that's
And
a
usually,
that's a good
yeah,
piece of advice. I think that goes with almost everything in life. Most people are going
yeah,
through the same things as you, but you gotta just stay strong.
and maybe even worse. Definitely worse, actually. There are definitely some people whose parents don't have jobs and whose parents have COVID or their family sick. I'm blessed that my family's healthy. I've had to quarantine a couple of times, but nothing crazy. So, I just remember why I'm so lucky, and I'm lucky to be healthy. So, I'm stressed, but definitely not as stressed as some other people.
Yep, and that's very optimistic. Um, I think it's a great way to end, actually. On that note,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Been a pleasure, stuff.
thank you very much
Thanks
for
for
joining me
having me.
today. Uh,
Of course, man.
we have to have you again sometime.
No, yeah, definitely next week. And if anyone else from Kaleidoscope's watching, hop in. It's just free to talk, no script. Sit down, open your computer, and just talk about whatever is on your mind.
Oh yeah. All right.
All
Thank you
right,
very much,
thanks,
Soul.
stuff.
Thank you for joining
I'll
me
see you
today.
next week.
Yep, sounds good.
Next week. All right, have a good one,
All
so
right, you too.
bye
Bye,
bye.
Soul.